So the topic of my paper is argumentation, which is a key feature of the academic essay. The essay itself is the most common genre that undergraduate students across disciplines have to write. Yet many students don't know that this requires argumentation. Also, what argumentation actually looks like in academic writing is often poorly understood by academic tutors, and therefore not adequately taught to students. In this paper, I present research I have carried out into undergraduate students' difficulties when they come to university with developing arguments in their essays, and the type and quality of instruction they receive. For the analysis, I used a three-part definition of argumentation, which describes what students need to learn to construct an argument. On the basis of my findings, I proposed an essay writing framework for improving the teaching of academic writing. I will start by providing some background information on concepts of argument, as well as the teaching and learning of argumentation at university. So as to the concept of argument, the term argument is used in different ways in academic discourse. It can refer to individual claims or the whole text. In reference to individual claims, argument means that a proposition is supported by grounds and forums, as in the Talmudic model of premises and conclusions. In reference to the whole text, argument is defined by Andrews as a process of argumentation, a connected series of statements intended to establish a position and implying response to another or more than one position. This latter definition is clearly the most relevant one for essay writing, as it is this development of the writer's position which is commonly called developing an argument. However, there are two more aspects of argumentation. One is that in order to develop a position, the writer first needs to analyze and evaluate content knowledge. And the other one, or in other words, to select from sources the type of information that is useful for the development of their position. The other aspect is the presentation of the writer's position for the logical arrangement of propositions. So these three components, first the analysis and evaluation of content knowledge, the writer's development of the position, and the presentation of that position in a coherent manner is used in this paper as the definition of developing an argument. Defining argumentation by these three components is useful from a pedagogic perspective because it describes the abilities writers need to develop in essay writing. The definition was also helpful as a framework for analysis in my research, as I will show later. Now I will look at how or whether argumentation is taught to university students. Educationalists have repeatedly stressed that argumentation, which is clearly so crucial to academic writing, should be explicitly taught in higher education. They have also stressed that the nature of argumentation is highly discipline-specific and should therefore be taught by tutors in the discipline. However, this is not happening. Argumentation is not part of the teaching provision in undergraduate programs at British universities. If at all, it is taught generically on critical thinking or academic writing courses. This is partly due, as I'll show later, to the fact that academic tutors tend to have only some understanding of argument themselves. Lee and Street, in their research, for instance, found that tutors did recognize argument as a key element of successful writing, but had difficulty to explain the nature of a well-developed argument. They used the term of critique, critical analysis, and even opinion interchangeably for explaining what argument means. This conceptual uncertainty leads to the lack of effective teaching of argumentation. The usual support given to students is general advice on academic writing in study guides or core handbooks, and tutors' feedback on their essays. However, both types of support have severe limitations. Study guides and handbooks rarely deal explicitly with argumentation. And if they do, they focus on linguistic features and neglect the rhetorical functions of argument. Tutors' feedback is often of the categorical type, so they use imperatives such as clarity, analysis, and argument written in the margins of student essays. Because tutors tend to have no full understanding of argumentation themselves, they use such a vague terms in their feedback, which makes it hard for students to understand what is required in their essay writing. And this leads me to the next topic, which is the learning of argumentation. Students bring from secondary school starkly different concepts of argument with them, which do not at all comply with the nature of argumentation in academic essays. School essays often have rather simple argumentative structures, arguing only one claim, and they often invite the statement of personal opinion. By contrast, academic writing is evidence-based and requires the analysis of various and conflicting sources. So obviously, these concepts need adjusting when students start writing at university. As novice writers, they face difficulties with all three aspects of argumentation as defined in this paper. Looking at the first aspect, analyzing and evaluating content knowledge, students may not yet have the necessary level of subject knowledge. So as a result, they find it very difficult to distinguish relevant from irrelevant information, or to identify conflicting points of view in the literature. Considering the second aspect, establishing a position, this requires expressing a voice and a stance within an academic debate conducted by experts, which is problematic for novice writers who lack the necessary confidence. And as to the third aspect, presenting the writer's position in a coherent argument, in a coherent manner, this involves the arrangement and rearrangement of propositions at the macro level of the essay, so that the development of the position is reflected in a logical text structure. According to Andrews, this component is not addressed in most study guides and textbooks. Despite the important role of argument in the academic essay, not much research has been carried out into the teaching and learning of argumentation. To gain better insight, I investigated the learning needs and teaching provision in a case study of first-year undergraduate students in an applied linguistics program at a British university. The study had the following objectives. First, to identify the concept of argument students have when arriving at university. Second, to explore the difficulties students experience with argumentation in academic writing. And third, to discuss the limitations of current instruction and make recommendations for improvement. So next, I'm going to look at the research methodology. Relating to Objective 1, to identify students' understanding of the concept of argument, I gave an academic writing questionnaire to two cohorts of undergraduate students in the induction week. Altogether, 117 students participated. The questionnaire aims to elicit information on various issues, And one open-ended question asked directly, what is an argument in academic writing? As to research objective 2, students' difficulties with argumentation were investigated through the analysis of tutor comments of student essays and the analysis of student diaries. The analysis included 60 essays from 3 different first-year modules, with comments from 5 tutors teaching on these modules. 40 essays in the sample were from students who had achieved low grades, while the other 20 were from high-achieving students. The analysis focused mainly on the comment sheet that students provide for every essay, pointing out strengths and weaknesses, but occasionally the comments in the margins were also considered. As part of a wider study of academic writing, the students have been invited to keep a diary while they were writing essays. 8 students volunteered to participate. They were asked to keep a record of the process of writing the essay. There was no specific focus on argument. The diary entries covered the 4-week period when the 8 participants were writing their first graded assignment. For this study, the diary entries were analyzed for statements relating to argumentation. And as to objective 3, to assess possible limitations of writing instruction, I analyzed the writing guidelines in the student handbook and the tutor comments on the 60 essays, and looked for comments on the development of arguments. And next I'm referring to my findings. So, first of all, the results of the questionnaire and of the answers to the question, what is an argument in academic writing? 101 of the 117 respondents had answered the question, and many answers included more than one aspect of argument. Therefore, the numbers in the frequency column on the right side do not add up to 101. The answers were grouped into 8 categories that are listed in this table according to the frequency of mention. Clearly, the majority of students did not mention key aspects of argumentation as defined in this paper. Concerning the first aspect of the definition, evaluating and analyzing sources, less than half of the respondents mentioned the need for evidence, and only 8 the need for analysis, as can be seen here in category 7. A relatively large number of students disclosed a concept that is in conflict with academic writing. For instance, the 34 students who said that argument means stating your personal opinion. The following answer gives an example of this understanding. The students wrote, I believe argument in academic writing is when you strongly believe in a view and state why you believe in it. A narrow concept of argument is also reflected in the 39 statements in category 2 where students said argument has 2 sides. This concept stems from the typical thesis, antithesis, synthesis essays that is common in secondary schools. Only a minority of the respondents understood that arguments can involve more than 2 sides, and in category 5, that it needs a proper conclusion, or that argument is reflected in the large-scale structure of the text. The student answers revealed that many had concepts of arguments that were too narrow or inappropriate for essay writing at university. This shows the need to teach argumentation early on in the university program and to eradicate some misconceptions from students' previous writing experience. Now I turn to research objective 2, investigating students' difficulties with argumentation. Here I will only focus on the tutor comments on the 40 lower achieving essays. There were 78 comments concerned with argumentation. All of them address some kind of deficiency. The terms argument, and argumentation were explicitly mentioned in 62% of the comments. In the other cases, the comments referred to closely related concepts, such as critical analysis or evidence. For example, essay displays very little criticality. The comments were grouped into the categories shown in this table, so that it appears under the guise of lack of structure, lack of criticality analysis, lack of evidence, unrelated conclusions, and unrelated information. And I'll say a bit more about these categories later. Now, as to the student diaries, the analysis of the 8 student diaries produced 5 themes related to argumentation. These are listed here in order of the frequency of mention, and they are the use of sources, writing the conclusion, structure, who am I, that I will explain later, and demonstrating knowledge. To gain a deeper understanding of these difficulties, I will now use the 3 components of the definition of argumentation to analyze the tutor comments and the themes from the student diary. So, the first aspect, as you will remember, is analyzing and evaluating content knowledge. Students' failure to analyze and evaluate content knowledge was addressed in 3 categories of tutor comments. One is the lack of criticality and analysis, then the lack of evidence and unrelated information. All 14 comments in the category lack of criticality analysis were related to ineffective use of sources. For example, one tutor wrote, "Your essay lacks criticality. You provide lengthy reports of the literature without discussion." The comments illuminate the inability of the student to select and use information from the literature purposefully, that is, for supporting claims and for developing their own position. The students are aware of this problem too, the issue of having too much information and not knowing what's relevant and what isn't, was mentioned sometimes repeatedly in 7 of the 8 diaries. The following entry illustrates this problem. So the student wrote here under theme 1, use of sources. The student wrote, "Make tons of notes. I typed all the notes on a Word document and totaled 11 pages, which stressed me terribly. I get a feeling that I'm going off the topic." Another category of the tutor comments was unrelated information. The expression "does not fit the argument" was frequently found in the margins of student texts. A closer look at the six student texts in this category reveals the writer's tendency to display knowledge by presenting a breadth of mainly irrelevant information. So now I'm turning to the second component of argumentation to see what kind of difficulties students have in the area of developing a position. The term position or stance was not mentioned at all in the tutor comments, which may give the impression that the students had no problems with positioning. However, a closer inspection of the student text reveals that most of the 14 low-achieving writers had not developed a position. Instead, they had presented lists of facts from the literature or stated their personal opinion. This failure was always accompanied by shortcomings in the use of sources and in the structure, and this is what most comments refer to. Some comments, however, imply the need for positioning. For example, this one: the need to try to organize your ideas better based on authoritative sources, but with your own discussion and arguments. So the need for positioning is hidden in the vaguer terms of own discussion and argument. The failure to develop a position is also implicitly addressed in comments in category 4, unrelated conclusions. For example, your essay looks like a list of seemingly unrelated points without progressing towards a meaningful conclusion. The problem with a comment like this is that the students don't understand the role of the conclusion in positioning, which would be restating and summarizing the position the writer has developed in paper. And this is assuming that writers have known the requirements of positioning in the first place. So it's unlikely that they understand what's meant by meaningful conclusion. In the student diary, the difficulty of positioning becomes apparent in theme 2, writing a conclusion, and theme 4, who am I? The following entry suggests that students do not understand the role of the conclusion. The student wrote, I wrote a big section today, so only the conclusion is left. I'm not so worried about it because it is small. Theme 4, who am I, reflects students' feeling of insecurity and inferiority in face of published sources, which makes it difficult for them to take a position in an academic debate. This is expressed in the following entry. The student writes, in the exploratory, which is the informative essay they have written, he accused me of not being critical. How can I criticize so-and-so, a published author? I know so little, I have to accept what he says. So this entry shows a common misconception of criticality, namely that students think they have to criticize what's said in the literature. As I showed earlier, in all cases when tutors commented on lack of criticality, students have failed to select and use sources effectively. However, that meaning of criticality is clearly not communicated to the students. So now I turn to the third component of argumentation, the presentation of a position in a coherent manner. Lack of structure received by far the most tutor comments. 95% of the low-achieving essays were criticized for being badly or not at all structured. The comments remarked that ideas were not organized logically and that the argument was therefore jumpy. Here's an example of a tutor comment. Your arguments tend to get buried in the rather shapeless text structure. Most comments in this category recommended the use of headings and that there should be an outline in the introduction of the essay. However, these time-consuming devices only scratch the surface, and the real problem with structure is in fact closely linked to positioning. An analysis of the essay shows that it was the writer's inability to develop a position that led to a jumpy text. The difficulty of structuring the essay was also mentioned in the 6th diary entry. They clearly show the link between selecting and evaluating information and structure. Students who had gathered too much and often irrelevant information could not fit this information into a coherent text. This can be seen in the following student entry. I have all the information about around 20 theories and approaches, and what I'm missing is the structure by which those are to be presented. To sum up this section, I want to say that the student program presented in this paper may reveal nothing surprising to academic tutors who regularly assess student writing. However, the three-part definition of developing an argument, which I use as a framework for analysis, offers a new perspective. Because argumentation is defined by what students need to learn, the framework highlights shortcomings in writing instruction that might not have been obvious otherwise. And this leads me to objective 3 of this paper, namely investigating the limitations in teaching argumentation. The students in this study received general advice on academic writing only through 2 pages of writing guidelines in the student handbook and through tutor feedback. In both, there is no specific focus on argumentation. I've already mentioned some shortcomings in the tutor feedback. Examining their comments and the writing guidelines reveals 2 main limitations. The first is the vague labeling, which obscures the requirements of the academic essay, and in particular that of developing an argument. One example is the use of the term criticality and analysis, concepts which may have little meaning for novice writers. In the tutor comments, these terms were typically used in relation to, as I said before, the selection and use of sources. In the writing guidelines, the following advice on the use of sources can be found. It says, you will be expected to approach critically the ideas about which you have read. And it goes on to say, review your reading in the area and evaluate the ideas you have met. The problem with this type of advice is that unknown concepts are used to explain unknown concepts. How criticality, analysis, and evaluation relate to arguments remains unexplained. The second limitation is that both tutor feedback and writing guidelines do not address argumentation as the central requirement of academic writing. The writing guidelines advise on the structure and different parts of the essay, as well as on some aspects of style and presentation. What students need to learn in order to develop an argument is hidden in comments on related features such as the use of clauses or structure. One example is the advice on conclusions. I mentioned earlier that repeated comments were made by tutors on unrelated conclusions, but that the important role of the conclusion in positioning was not explained. In the writing guidelines, on the other hand, positioning is mentioned only in relation to the conclusion. It says there, it is very important that you reach your own conclusions based on the evidence you have presented earlier. The main purpose of the conclusion is to reach a final position in your essay. So here, students may get the impression that positioning takes place only in the conclusion. The vague and inconsistent instruction on writing revealed in this study is in line with previous studies such as that of Lee and Street. Based on these findings, I want to make some recommendations for improving the teaching of argumentation at universities. Given that the quality of the academic essay depends on the development of arguments, it is problematic that current writing instruction is not focused on argumentation, but refers to it fleetingly and inconsistently. Therefore, I propose that academic writing instruction should start with explaining that the overarching requirement in an essay is developing an argument. All related aspects, such as structure, style, and signposting, should be treated as subordinated. Based on the three-part definition of argumentation, I propose an essay writing framework that illustrates to students this central requirement of developing an argument. In this framework, the bold print in the middle text box is used to show that establishing an own position is the core of argumentation and equivalent to developing an argument. The figure also illustrates that this core element is closely interlinked with and dependent on the other two components, i.e. selecting and using the relevant information from sources and presenting the position in a coherent manner. Once knowledge writers have understood that developing an argument is the overarching aim of an essay, and that three components are involved, other features of academic writing can be referred to in their contributing role. Some of these features, for instance, structure and signposting, are presented in the lower row of boxes in the framework. The essay writing framework would help to explain certain aspects of writing, for instance, structure, in their relationship to positioning. The current advice on structure provided in the student handbook is the main body will consist of different stages or subtopics in a logical sequence. It may be organized in different ways. It may, for example, contain a background section and discussion section. With the new framework, the advice could be rephrased to point out the importance of positioning by saying that positioning is reflected in the structure, by saying the structure of the essay should reflect how you develop your position. In the main body, discuss different viewpoints, compare or contrast, and explain why you are taking this position. In the conclusion, briefly summarize the previous discussion and state your position clearly again. So while the first advice in the handbook, the current advice, truly neglects positioning, this is made very, very clear in the rephrased advice. So using the essay framework as a basis for writing instructions would also ensure a commonly understood terminology. Tutors could phrase comments more precisely by referring to the three components and highlight how particular inefficiencies in student essays hinder the development of arguments. However, I'm not claiming that the framework can help the complex aspects that appear in the lower row of boxes of the framework, for instance, evaluating sources or comparing evidence. These aspects need to be addressed subsequently, for instance, by providing and analyzing student text. To sum up, my research has provided further evidence for the need to teach argumentation explicitly to students. It reveals that students come to university with partial or incorrect concepts of argument. The instruction they receive at university addresses argumentation inconsistently and insufficiently. The fact that argumentation is a key requirement of essay writing is obscured through the use of vague language and an emphasis on certain features. I have therefore argued that the teaching of writing should have the development of arguments as its starting and central point. For this purpose, I proposed an essay writing framework that highlights the development of arguments as the overarching aim of essay writing. This approach to teaching academic writing now needs to be tested and evaluated in order to show that it improves students' understanding of what essay writing is about. Thank you.